Mm. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bruegel. We are gonna start shortly. Victor Negrescu is running a bit late, but we are not gonna wait for him and start right away. Thank you all for coming for this session, where we discuss the upskilling and reskilling initiatives to improve labor markets for young adults and also mid-career workers. So as you all know, we are currently experiencing a rapid change in the way we are doing jobs. The labor markets are transitioning not only because of technological improvements like AI and algorithms and automation, but also because of demographic changes and environmental challenges. So this all brought us to an era where we observe rapid changes and which also we don't have the regulations in place yet. So in this session, first we would discuss the issue from a youth perspective and discuss how we can help them to navigate and how we can utilize the youth potential to have a more resilient EU workforce. As you all know, young people are the most vulnerable group in the labor market because they don't have the experience and the job-related skills, which usually help people to navigate during labor market recessions and problems. But they also don't have the social networks, the professional networks, which most of the time help us land on jobs. And on top of that, they're also sometimes prone to discrimination because of their age, and all these aspects are making their labor market transition even more difficult than it's supposed to be. While this is a steady phenomenon, during the times of economic downturns, they even got hit more disproportionately compared to older workers. And we also saw similar trends during COVID pandemic. All of a sudden, all the institutions which were helping them to have a smoother transitions from schools to a labor force, like work-based learning programs or apprenticeships, all of a sudden they were put on hold and young people left without these supporting systems. And as a result, we observed increased youth unemployment rates, higher inactivity rates, prolonged unemployment, and also discouragement. So we would like to take the opportunity of the Year of Skills being in the agenda at the EU level to have these important aspects in our discussions and to learn from each other and to see how we can really make the most of this year. Thank you. We have great people to address these issues today with us. And hopefully, I also know in the audience we have important social partners which we couldn't invite as a speaker, but I'm very happy to have them here, especially people representing the education sector and the young people themselves, actually. So I'm very happy and I'm looking forward to have a fruitful discussions towards the end of the session. First, I will start the panel with introductory questions to warm up, to get things going. Then we will have the open floor for Q&A, minimum 30 minutes, so be ready for asking questions and pushing our speakers to share their view. So probably most of you already know, but today we have Elize Mohamedou from OECD. She is the head of Center for Skills. Center for Skills analyzes the effects of major labor market trends like this digitalisation, globalization, aging, and migration, and also the impact of these factors in labor markets, but also skills needs. We also have Delphine Rideli. She is the Director General of CEMET. CEMET is the representative of MET Industries, metal engineering and technology-based industries. They represent over 200,000 companies across EU. They employ 17 million people directly and 15 million people indirectly. So we also have David Timmis. Some of you might already know David in person. He is from the Brussels bubble. So he is the Global Communication Manager of Generation. Generation is a global non-profit organization that specializes in offering training and job placement services for adults and helping them to land on careers which they wouldn't have access otherwise. So the organization works in collaboration with over 9,000 employers across 17 countries, not limited to EU, but also in US and rest of the world. And since its launch in 2015, they trained 70,000 people and helped them to have a prosperous labor market experience. So as I mentioned, at the end of my questions, we will have questions for people in the room, but also online. The online audience can use Slido to ask questions using the code #skills. So let's start. Also, since Victor is not here, I'm still going to introduce him. So some of you already know him, but he is a member of the European Parliament, part of the Group for Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. He is the Vice Chair of Committee on Education and Culture, and he is also a member of the Committee on Budgets. So it will be good to push him on those topics. So I will start with Eliza. Center for Skills also provides country policy advice and works with countries to improve governance and effective design of lifelong learning programs that are responsive to labor market changes. Can you provide an overview of the primary challenges young people are experiencing in the labor markets during their transition from education to employment?
Thank you, and very happy to be here with everyone. I think probably the biggest challenge is unemployment. Young people in OECD countries are about 2.5 times more likely to be unemployed than older persons. And that's certainly one element. One of the things we have also seen, apologies, is of course the transition from school to work is really something that for us at the OECD, and particularly at the Center for Skills, is very important. And there are ways, however, to look into this. And some of the policies we're really pushing and trying to get countries to increase usage of are career guidance and work-based learning, because those two we have seen throughout our research really have an impact on improving that transition from school to work. I don't know if you want me to expand on these two, or if you want to go through the round on these two, particularly policy options.
Not necessarily. We can have more questions for the audience, sure, because there is a broad agreement that among experts and stakeholders regarding the importance of closing the gap between education and labor markets, and also improving the job market access for young adults. So here I would like to turn to Delphine and ask her to give us a bit of about the employer perspective, because many industries were already experiencing skill shortages even before it came to our agendas. So it has been an issue for many years, and they already developed some tools or coping mechanisms to deal with these shortages. And what are the main strategies your members have adopted to improve alignment between school and industry needs and the outcomes of the education systems?
Thank you very much. It's true that when I hear what Elisa is saying, what is striking in that you mentioned the high level of unemployment, and at the same time we are facing today one of the biggest challenges, skill shortages, which may seem as a bit of a paradox. And this is not new. Rightly said, the problem of skill shortage has been there in our industry for the last 30 years, probably, and still we don't have the solution. What we've been trying to do is to put in place a number of solutions, and in our sector, it's to attract as many people as possible. The young generation is one of the targets. Women is another target. In our industry, only 14% in general are women So it's really very little. And of course, career guidance is one of the tools. Just to mention, yesterday we organized an event in the European Parliament on career guidance and what to do. We organized that with the chemical industry because we face similar issues, and with one MEP of the CULT committee, because we need to find a way to make sure that the younger generation is attracted towards STEM, towards our sector, towards our companies which suffer from a bad image, which is a pity because our industry is an attractive industry. So career guidance and how we can close the gap between the school and our companies is one of the targets of the actions we are taking. Of course, also promoting VET is an important scope of action of our members. There are a lot of initiatives which are taken. We are promoting VET quite a lot because we believe that dual learning is key and that we need to work very closely with the education system. It is very important that companies and the workers are the one who tell the education system what are the needs of the companies, because we are close to the labor market. We know what we need in terms of training, in terms of skills also, what are the competencies that will be needed for the workers of tomorrow. So we need to find way to close the gaps between the education system and the labor market. So there are a lot of initiatives in order to make sure that there is a very close cooperation that exists in many countries. We see a lot of very good initiatives between the social partners in Italy, in Germany, where the social partnership is very developed, in France, where there are a lot of training centers that are managed by the social partners themselves. So this is also something on which our members are working.
Thank you. I will continue with David. And first, because we are discussing social partnership between employers and employee agencies, but civil society is also an important partner in providing skills needed in the labor market. So, David, can you address how civil society fits in this picture? What are the main pitfalls we should be aware of to secure success of civil society skills initiatives, to be precise? Majority of generation graduates are coming from lower educational backgrounds. At most, I think 54% of your graduates have at most high school degree, and 85% of your graduates are younger than 30 years old. But yet you are able to secure 77% employment rate within the 3 months after graduation, and most of your employment partners are quite happy and willing to continue this partnership. What is the key elements that the civil society should be careful and really address while designing these systems to provide reskilling and upskilling?
Thank you, and thank you for quoting those numbers. Indeed, we do have quite a high success rate globally of our programs. Before I answer your question, I just wanted to re-emphasize what my co-panelists have mentioned. Career guidance is very important. Outside of generation, I'm actually a career coach, and I saw how in the last 2 years, the number of people that came to me with really fundamental questions about what they want to do in life has tripled, and I speak about people from 20 to 40 plus, so across the range of ages. And this is something more and more we see also a generation that we need to provide also guidance, not just reskilling. So just to close this parenthesis. When it comes to what works in our case, and I see more and more across the industry, and to quote a study which we can maybe share with the participants afterwards, Harvard published in 2021 a study called Work to Learn, which was part of their Future of Work initiative. And I'm going to quote some of these findings because they're exactly relevant to our work at Generation as well, and to what most civil society organizations in this space are facing. First of all, according to this study from 2021, only 35% of relevant organizations in the workforce development space actually work directly with employers, which is quite shocking if you think about it, because if we're talking about the gap between education to employment, many reskilling providers don't talk with the employers almost at all, which is, I think, a huge issue, as my co-panelist also mentioned earlier. We do that. For us, that's the main part of our methodology, or 7-step methodology. The first step is talking with the employers in the market to see what are their needs, how we can help them, and in some cases even building the curriculum together with them. Another important finding from this study from Harvard, which we can relate to, is, and you did mention, we work with vulnerable people. Other NGOs in this space, unfortunately, don't offer wraparound supports, subsidies in other words. So if we try to do an exercise of imagination, we're all very fortunate to be in Brussels, in this event, in this room. There's many people in the world who are less fortunate that we work with a generation for whom even taking the time from their job in maybe a supermarket or from taking care of their children, it's a huge cost. So wraparound supports that we offer are subsidies for transport, childcare, in some cases even housing, to make sure that these vulnerable people have basically no excuse not to come to our free programs. Unfortunately, only 13% of the organization that Harvard surveyed, that are, again, worth mentioning, all based in the US, so there's very US focused of this research, only 13% offer such support to vulnerable people. And two other findings, and I'm going to then close this point. The other one is the leveraging of technology. Hello, Mr. Negrescu. Unfortunately, very few organizations in the workforce development space leverage technology. Even after COVID, only approximately 11% of relevant organizations in the space have a hybrid model. 9% use online tools predominantly. We at Generation do hybrid after COVID. Before COVID, like most of our peers, we were doing offline trainings. Now everything is hybrid, online and offline. And finally, and I'll stop after this point, but probably the most important, only 9% of these organizations that Harvard surveyed actually offer trainings in transferable skills. Because what we see happening most often is that even if it's a company funding the training or a government, they really just look at the technical skill needed. They maybe want to prepare coders, they prepare people to do Java development. We also offer behavioral and mindset skills, because we realized we prepare people for a job is an easy solution, but we prepare them for a career. For that, they need transferable skills, and that's what we also try to do with our graduates. And I'll stop here, but just some food for thought for the beginning.
Thank you, David, for a detailed description of what we should be careful about while designing the civil society initiatives. And we have Victor Negrescu with us here also, just in time for his question. So we have been discussing what was the pitfalls in providing reskilling and upskilling for young people to overcome the labor market challenges they almost always face, but now with the economic crisis, that they are more vulnerable against these external shocks. But my question to you is more about the European Year of Skills and how we can, how it relates to European Skill of Youth, actually. So, because you are a member of the parliament who advocates for consistent investment in education, culture, digitalization, and youth. And I know you are already trying to create this how we can tackle the results we achieved with the European Year of Youth, and how we can continue those initiatives in the coming years and not let them just die. So I wanted to ask you how we can utilize the youth network and infrastructure built in 2022, and what the education priorities are for the Year of Skill. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and I'm really happy to be here today, and sorry for being late. Actually, I come from a discussion in the Parliament precisely on the report focused on the European Year of Skills, and I represent the Culture and Education Committee in those discussions, because it's a common report of the EMPL committee, the committee in charge of employment. Of course, we also came with a strong opinion on that, in order to ensure, like you said, also a relation between the European Year for Youth and the European Year for Skills. Because, of course, in order to meet the challenges, but also in order to have, important outcomes, we have to have a continuous process. with very simple but also concrete deliverables at the end, tangible deliverables. Because, you know, this is my second mandate here in the European Parliament. It's not the first time that we're speaking about skills. But in the same time, it is the first time where we fixed at European level quite high objectives. So we increase people's expectations when it comes to what we want to achieve at European level. When referring, of course, to the level of skills, the quality of the trainings, and of course the accessibility, like you said very well as well. So it's up to us to make sure that we also deliver on what we promised. And of course here in Brussels, of course in the Brussels bubble, we often speak about that, and we also design concrete policies with relations to all of that. But we have to make sure that, you know, in people's lives, there is a concrete improvement. And here, when you look at data, we are confronted with different difficult situations. So for instance, you know, we want almost 90% of the European workforce to have access to lifelong learning at their job. But if we look at the data, only 37% actually of the workforce at European level had access during their professional life to lifelong learning, which represents a huge gap between what we want to achieve and what is happening on the ground. In the same time, we allocated a lot of resources for skills, and this is also present in the recovery plans, but also, for instance, in the European Social Fund. And this is good that we have those available funds. But how can we and what do we do in order to build synergies at European level? Because, for instance, when it comes to the recovery plan, we have some things happening in Romania and some things happening in Germany, other things happening in Spain. But there is no correlation of our common policies in this regard. So we have a common labor market, but when it comes to the action, we don't actually work together. And the same thing happens also with European Social Fund, where we have silos of actions, some of which were really successful, wonderful examples of things that have been done by the private sector or by the NGOs or by local authorities, but they stay there, they remain there. We present them from time to time in nice conferences. Usually the Commission comes in and they present those wonderful examples that have been achieved with European funds, but we don't upscale them. We don't make them European projects, and we don't use what we learn in different initiatives, of course, in order to make sure we don't commit similar mistakes when we implement such project with European funding. So, of course, there isn't a perfect solution to what you addressed as an issue, but I'm quite confident that, of course, we can build the necessary methods, mechanisms, solutions here in order to meet those, high objectives. But we have to make sure that the ecosystem interested in upskilling the European workforce is even more visible, more involved in the decision-making process, but also more involved in the implementation. And one of the key elements, in my opinion, when we need to develop further ways of supervising this process is in the European semester format. In the European semester format, we do the national report of what is happening in each member state. We highlight partially the issue of skills, but we don't go in deep details and we don't involve stakeholders in the process of evaluating, but also in making sure those recommendations that come from Europe are actually being implemented. So we are discussing here in Brussels, and we have people that look at the legislation, but it's good, of course, to make sure we are discussing with the people in Madrid, discussing with the people in Rome, with the people in other places around Europe, and we really create an ecosystem that reacts to mistakes, gives visibility to the positive examples, and really enables us to achieve those objectives at European level in an integrated way by reducing also the existing gaps between member states, but also within member states.
True. Thank you for highlighting the importance of a comprehensive and holistic approach which involves all social partners in the process. So I'm delighted that we have some of them here in the audience today. So I will now, before going to audience question, I will ask a second quick round of questions, but this time more a bit on twin transition and how new challenges it brings to our domains. I want to start with David. In terms of reskilling and upskilling, what are the new unforeseen challenges that you're experiencing now with digital and green skills?
Thank you for the question. We actually, I didn't mention before, we prepare people for tech jobs, healthcare jobs, customer service, skilled trades, and green jobs. And at the moment, this is the order of priority for us. What we see now more and more, that green jobs in the next 5 to 10 years will become probably our second biggest priority after tech jobs, which will remain high in demand. What we don't see as much here in Brussels, me personally, but in general around the world, we don't see the debate that is happening luckily around us having to achieve our climate goals, also moving to the sub-debate of who's actually going to help us achieve those goals, because implicitly, if you want to have a greener economy, you'll have green jobs, but we don't currently have a labor market which has the necessary skills to fill in these jobs. We started only in 2021, so we have maybe less than 500 learners in Europe that are preparing to enter a green job. To give you an example, the green jobs that we prepare people for now are retrofit advisors in the UK and Ireland. These are the individuals that come to your home and advise you about how we can make your home more sustainable. In France, we prepare people to become bike repair specialists because there's a huge demand for bike repair specialists, which is again a way to create this green economy. And finally, in Spain, we prepare people to become photovoltaic panel installers, which is again, of course, a huge demand. The finding from these 2.5 years almost of practice is that, unfortunately, the awareness is not yet there. People don't speak enough about the green economy. The challenge is that most of these jobs that I mentioned are attractive for people above 40 years old. 50% of our students in these programs are above 50 years old, which is obviously a question to think about. And then the final question is, there's going to be even more jobs than we can now see created in this sector. And one of our partners, which is based in Brussels, also called Solar Power Europe, which brings together solar power companies, businesses in general to help improve the industry, they foresee that by 2050 there will be around 4 million jobs just in the solar power energy alone. But as I said, we see now in Spain with our photovoltaic panel program, there's very few other NGOs like us doing work in this space. And the big question I want to leave the audience with, because we are in the youth part of the panel, is how can we get more young people interested in such jobs? Because to close up, when you post a job which is called retrofit advisor, and we've done some A/B testing in our organization, nobody knows what that is. At least I didn't know personally. We tried changing that job with sustainability specialist, 80% increase in job applications. The problem is you cannot call every job sustainability specialist in this green economy. So we have to see how we can get more appeal to this industry, which will need more and more people with the right skills.
Thank you, David. Appealing young people was also a problem of MET Industries. You slightly touched upon that in the previous round, but what other new challenges are MET Industries experiencing, partially because of the escalated change in skill demands due to twin transition? So do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. I think for us, the twin transition is bringing a lot of challenges because it's not the first time that we are facing transition. I mean, our industry has known a lot of revolution. So for us, it's not really a revolution. It's more an evolution, but everything is happening very fast because we are facing digital and green at the same time. Contrary to you, we don't talk about green jobs. It's just jobs, because green jobs are also digital jobs. They are just the new jobs for our sector. So we don't like to qualify them as green. They are just the industry job for tomorrow. The main challenge for us is the anticipation problem. To be very honest, we don't really know what kind of job we will need tomorrow morning. Of course, we know what we need today, but if you ask most of our companies, it's still very much complicated to anticipate the number of jobs they will need in 5 or 7 or 10 years. And the problem is that to train the qualified people, it takes some time. You don't train a welder, you don't train an electrician, you don't train a data scientist overnight. It takes a long time. And those training, they require quite some thinking, because they require some evolution. And this also means that you need to work quite a lot with the education system to be able to anticipate what type of new skills. You mentioned rightly all the soft skills that this also requires, and today we know that at the workplace it's crucially important to be digitally skilled, to have all the technicity, but also to be able to work in a team, to have all the soft skills that a company requires. So I think there is a lot of problem to be solved with regard to anticipation. You need to be very agile in the way that we create the skills, and this is one of the crucial things. Now, there is also this question of attractiveness that we have mentioned. It's true that being qualified as green, it helps a little bit, because you mentioned sustainability. It's true. It's a matter of communication. You have to communicate and you have to explain that working for the industry, it's not working in a plant where everything is black, dirty, noisy. I mean, it's not Zola. I don't know if you know Emile Zola, the famous writer, where everything was sad and absolutely awful. It's nice if you work honestly in an automotive company. It's silent, it's white, it's very nice environment, it's a lot of robots. It's just that in the mind of people, the industry is sending a bad image. And if you talk to parents and if you tell them that they have to convince their kid that they can become a welder, that they can become an engineer, that they can come and work in the industry, they will say, oh, no, no, no. He has to go until have a general study, and that's certainly not the pathway that he will choose. He will not go into VET. That's not the right pathway. Well, this is a wrong thinking. We still have to work, and we have to convince that working for the industry gives you a fantastic career with good working condition, good wages, very good wages, to be very honest. I mean, being a welder pays very well. So communication is really key. And also we have to explain that working in the industry means providing solution, because there are a lot of industrial sectors where you provide the solution for tomorrow. You work for the green economy, you are the solution provider. So I think that what we have tried to do is also to communicate to the youngest generation, to attract them and have the young people talking to the young people. So using their social media, going on Instagram, going on TikTok, using their networks, because that's where they are and that's what they understand. If you continue going on Facebook to talk to a 15 years old, it's outdated. They don't use Facebook anymore. So you have to go on TikTok and you have to have campaigns with people who talk to them in a language that they understand. So this is what we are trying to do. We are also trying to have apprentices going to schools to explain what they are doing as apprentices. So what we do is talk their language to the youngest generation, to explain that VET is the right pathway, that industry brings career, to make them understand that they have to come and work for the industry. There is a lot to do, but crucially, what is important is find a way to anticipate, identify the skill needs, increase the cooperation between education system and the social partners and the industry, and find a way to attract the youngest generation to the industry. This is really a set of tools that we need to put in place in order to make sure that we have the rightly skilled workforce for tomorrow.
Thank you. So I want to quickly touch upon the anticipation aspect that Delphine mentioned. So one of the criticism or concerns about the European Year of Skills is that it is too much focused on job-related skills. So, and there is a huge voice coming from social partners, which hopefully raise their voices in the Q&A session as well, that we should be having a more holistic approach, also focusing on transversal skills, life skills, so that we can create this learning culture and anticipate changes on a agile manner. So, but I will quickly go back to vet education. As Delphine said, mentioned, that vet education is really viewed as a second best option in many countries. But we also see in countries where vet education is really strong, then the young labor force is also more strong and protected against the downturns in the labor market. For example, during COVID, all countries experienced spikes in unemployment rates among young people, but Netherlands, it just stagnated. It didn't increase, so it just stayed at its pre-pandemic levels. So this is one of I see a lot of potential in vet education to strengthen the labor force for young people, but also for elderly, but that's for the second session. I want to ask Elisa, what is the role of vet education? Because I know you also work a lot on vet education and you give consultancy to countries. So in your point of view, what is the role in bridging the widening skill gap? How we should see vet education?
So I think we see vet as actually one of the best vectors in this twin transition, and it's also because vet is very close to the work experience. So I agree with Delphine. One of the main issues we have is, of course, the image of vet, but and that's something that is, I think, starting to change, both from the policymakers who now see it really as an efficient and fast way to get people much more skilled in these emerging sectors, but also from the young sectors, from the young people. And that comes back as well to the career guidance we meant, which is really a lot as well about making sure that, for instance, we provide programs that are seen as more in these sectors. So that's one thing we see a lot. One of the other things about VET is that also our research shows that actually it provides you faster with jobs and with much better labor outcomes. So they actually earn more than the general education and keep the jobs as well. So it is actually a sector that is one that should be attractive in terms of work experience. It's also one that what we see as well is now particularly some of the programs, they're much more flexible and much more accessible. So you don't have a 4-year diploma to go through to be able to actually engage directly. And some of these new vet schools, particularly in tech and in green, don't even require for you to have a prior diploma. And that opens up a whole opportunity for a disadvantaged youth, but also from people who are upskilling, reskilling. And so that's really one of the things that we see there. I think, though, that we need to work a lot more on some of the, also within VET, on some of these appearance of the programs being a lot more including new technologies. But there are examples, for instance, in France particularly, you have schools such as the Adatech school, which really has focuses, for instance, on STEM careers and on women. You have another one on École Gustave, which is focusing on boot camps, so 3 months of a boot camp, and then you're already ready to work and have actually a pipeline of companies that are ready to hire people. So I do think that VET is there. We do have this image of VET, but the more we show it as the sector where you can find the jobs, you are in the emerging sectors, and I think that's really where we need to focus, because for us that's where we could actually address some of these shortages. If we look about the green jobs, even though Delphine doesn't want to talk about it, it's really expected to have 20 million jobs by 2030. So these jobs are going to happen, and we won't get there if we have to wait for people to go through a very general education sector. The other part on VET is that we're also focusing a lot on the transversal skills. So you don't come out only with very technical skills, you also come out with the other skills that, to go to David's point, allow you also to move across sectors as well much easily. And so that's for us really where we can see that that could work quite well.
Thank you. Actually, that's great to hear that VET education already covers a broader area than the formal education, including transversal skills.
It does, but if I may. that's important is that it has to have a significant work-based learning component. So not the VET programs where it's only schoolwork, and that's where we see it's quite different. The problem is we have young people, so you have young people who come to 15 years old who have not had, only about 40% of young people around 15 years old have had a work experience through, sort of job shadowing or internship. That's not going to work.
Indeed, work-based learning is quite important. Now Canada has a 100% target to include all young people to have some sort of work-based learning experience. So it could be anything, but everyone is supposed to have gone through to a workspace before they enter the labor market. So I also want to highlight something that I find very important, that VET can actually provide the opportunity for the marginalized groups of the society to come back in the labor force, because they most of the time don't have the formal trainings or requirements for a more sophisticated program, but VET with having less restrictions can provide an platform to include them back in the labor force. So that's great news. Thank you. So to close, I will ask Victor to have a reflect on what we have been discussing here, and also some of the aspects about the expectations of civil society from European Year of Skills we touched upon, covering transversal skills, including vulnerable people, having a holistic approach, but and also using the existing capacity. But one thing we didn't discuss is to securing additional funding also. If you want, maybe you can also touch upon that, whether we will have extra funding opportunities for the Year of Skills, or we will be utilizing existing budget which is already secured for these initiatives.
So first of all, when it comes to skills and competencies, because you mentioned, of course, formal and non-formal training as well as being part of the process of upskilling Europeans, I can tell you, at least in the report of the European Parliament, we're going to have clear references, of course, to non-formal part, but also to the need to invest in transversal skills, and of course try to reorganize a little bit the programs in order to actually make sure that at the end we are actually training people. And one of the examples that I often give, especially is with regards to how we are using the available funding and the fact that we are maybe not using it in a proper way. So for instance, the European Social Fund, this has been used in many member states, but in most of the countries, they were financing programs giving people a profession. So instead of, for instance, in the IT field, instead of training people how to be good in using Python or Java, and if they know that, you can easily find a job, we were financing programs preparing IT professionals. And of course, you know very well, between training someone in having a specific skill and training someone in a full-time program, there is a big difference. It costs more, it takes more time, you get less people interested, so you don't actually manage to deliver on the market what are basically the requests. So when it comes to the funding part, it's not only an issue about the amounts, it's about how we are using the available funds. How are we engaging the private sector in order to co-finance, co-sponsor different initiatives? How do we make sure that the structures, NGOs or social partners that are, have a real foot on the ground are also part of the different initiatives? Because it's not easy to get people to train. And I often saw, maybe you saw that in your countries as well, you have beneficiaries of EU funds that do advertising to convince people to come and join the training program financed through the European Social Fund, instead of working with a social partner or NGO that actually knows those people, that can convince them to be part of the program, because there is already a sort of familiarity and they know those people, they know what they need, and they can convince them, but also offer them the necessary support to be part of the training. And of course, we also do not reflect on the full challenges. For instance, how difficult it is for a young mother, for instance, to allocate 2 hours for the training part. because she doesn't have maybe enough time to do that. So also how difficult it is from someone from a social disadvantaged background also to not, allocate the time that he or she needs for the family work or other elements, and of course focusing on the training part. So we really have to do more when it comes to the quality of implementation and all those details to meet the targets. And for that, of course, I hope this European Year of Skills will bring a very concrete perspective on how we can achieve that and make sure we meet those results in a tangible way. Unfortunately, we don't have additional funds, for the European Year for Skills. And I know, for instance, that this has been the case for many European years, with one exception, for instance, the European Year for Youth. The European Year for Youth, 2 years ago, when we decided that, the president of the commission, she came in front of the parliament and she said, next year is the European Year for Youth. But they forgot to put money for the European Year for Youth in the common budget. So it was us in the European Parliament, and actually I was the person initiating the amendment, asking for some money for the European Year for Youth. We managed to agree at the level of the Parliament, asking for, I think it was about 6 million euros. But in the Council, it was very difficult to convince member states to agree in allocating 6 million at European level. Is not a lot. And the Commission was not there supporting us. So we really had to fight till the end. We got the 6 million. And now at the end of the European Year for Youth, we noticed that they didn't even spend the 6 million that we got them. So this is also, again, an issue of implementation. For the European Year of Skills, we don't have now specific funds. Fortunately, we are starting the European Year for Skills on the 9th of May, so we can make some readjustments. I'm also in the Budgets Committee, by the way, working on the budget. Hopefully, we'll get some money, but what I'm afraid is that we'll again get some money from the Parliament side, and they will not spend it. So details are important, and I think events like these ones, and of course, listening to the different stakeholders, but also the people from the public, this is really essential in seeing how we can actually move from nice speeches to concrete results, because people are waiting for us to deliver. And again, we look at the unemployment rate is not so high as it used to be, but we speak about millions of people that today do not have a job, that could have a job by simply training them or supporting them in finding something that suits them. So we have a lot of things to do, and I'm comfortable and sure that together with people that are involved as you, we can do that.
Thank you. Actually, that 6 million maybe you can transfer to this year. So, because one of the problems with reskilling and upskilling currently, mostly the employers are doing those efforts, and that only serves to a given society. So it doesn't reach unemployed, it doesn't reach inactive, it doesn't reach people with low skills, low education levels, or people in elementary occupations. So definitely we need on the funding side more involvement of non-private initiatives. So 6 million would be good source for that. So now, this time it's the turn of the audience, and we already have some questions on Slido, but maybe first we can start with people in the room, if somebody already has a question. Okay, so we are starting with in-house, with Laura. Thank you.
Hi, yes, my name is Laura Nurski. I'm a fellow at Bruegel. I was really interested in hearing Delphine talk about skill anticipation and getting also young people and women into STEM education and careers. So I want to ask, not just to you, but to everyone who wants to answer. It's quite a selfish question because I'm the mother of 2 young girls. They're 6 and 9, and I'm sure they have the capabilities for technical careers, because they can manage iPads, iPhones, Nintendo, Netflix, whatever you want. Even the 6-year-old, the 9-year-old is already making PowerPoints. But the thing is, when I offer them school holiday camps, for example, and I offer them, there's this week of programming robots, or there's this week of doing gymnastics and cheerleading, they're like, I want to do what my friends do. So even though 5 boys in the class are doing the robot camp, 1 girl is doing the gymnastic camp, and my girls want to do gymnastics. So a lot of these awareness campaigns of getting women into STEM careers, I feel, but I'm not an expert, are focused on like teenagers or young labor market entrants or people who are choosing their graduate careers. But this socialization process starts at the age when kids realize there's different genders in society that have different expectations, and it starts really, really, really young, like 3 years, 4 years old. So please, I know this is like a personal struggle for me as a parent, but also wider in society. You know, how can we address this to make sure that girls at a really, really young age see these career paths for 20 years later, you know? Thank you.
See that more and more our members are thinking how to address the youngest ones. I can give you one example. In Italy, for example, there is a program that was launched by some companies where they've worked with kids in primary school on a project where they were to create an object with mechanics, and it was really like very small kids. In order to show them that they could, at the age of 6, 7, 8, of course they were surrounded by teachers and people in the companies, but they could at a very small age build something, and at the end of the day they built a robot. And they were very small, and it was both young girls and young boys. So I think you're right, we have to talk to young girls and young boys, but I think the problem is much wider than this. The problem is society. I mean, if we continue giving dolls to the girls and trucks to the boys and all the stereotypes that we have in our society, it's going to take many, many, many years. And it's true that for the moment it's quite complicated. So we see a lot of campaigns in our members, where we have young girls talking to, in fact, the young girls at school, but for the moment the target is more starting at 11 or 12, because that's where, you know, the young ones start reflecting about the future. But the thing is, it's not so much the young people, it's also the career counselors, the career guidance. I mean, you have the right thinking because you are working on this quite a lot, but to be very honest, the country where I come from, which is France, and I know very much the subject because my kids are 21 and 25, so I've been through this process. When you are at school, I mean, the possibilities that are offered, it's either you are good and you go to general school until baccalaureate, or you are bad and you can be sent to apprenticeship. Going to apprenticeship, it's not like, you know, when you are a good kid and you can follow and you can do a career in the industry. And the problem is that the teachers and the career advisors, they don't know what are the possibilities. You can become a lawyer, a doctor, you know, I mean, all this general profession, but they basically don't know very much what is a data scientist. They don't know all the professions that can be offered in the industry. They don't know what photovoltaic is and so on. And that's the problem. But I mean, I'm not saying we can blame them. I mean, this is evolving so fast. So that's why we need to work more and more, industry and the school, industry and the career advisors, so that there is a closer cooperation and that there is a real understanding about all the possibilities which are offered by STEM and all the jobs that will come tomorrow. So there is really a lot of things to do. Stereotype which need to be changed. I mean, us as citizens, as parents, I mean, as a community, but also in the schools very early. And it's many challenges that we have to face. It's not only about training, it's really about changing the mindsets on everything. And it takes time, but we will manage. We have to manage. Otherwise, I think that the green transition, the digital transition, it will take too long, and probably, yeah, it will be an issue.
Thank you, Delphine. I think Elisa also wants to address this question.
a couple of things. So I think Delphine is right, role modeling, right? So you cannot be what you cannot see. And I think that's particularly important coming from young people. The other thing is also the career guidance. I feel sometimes when we talk about it, people think it starts when you're a teenager. In Portugal, every public school starts career guidance from 5 years old until 16 to 17. So that really looks into it. And it's really an issue. I sat recently in a presentation of a school with 58 slides on, the last year of high school and what you could do and where they. There was one slide on VET, one. And the slide said, if you need more information, come back to us, we can discuss. I mean, that's the message we're sending. And I sat through the 58 slides. So it really is, and this is really an issue that we have to start sending. So I think there's also training of the career counselors as well. We need to make sure as well that they can present this. But I think we also have to bring a lot of young girls to these schools as well to speak about this and say as well the wide range of jobs that it means. It's not just about, doing extremely technical jobs. It opens up a whole array of other jobs. So I would say the two things definitely.
I want to add something on career guidance and also the example of Portugal. So these are things you can really see the proof in numbers. We see in Portugal the unemployment rates improved drastically, and I was wondering what did they do? Now today I am learning they introduced this career guidance.
Study in Canada that showed that young people who were exposed to a career discussion when they were, by the year they were 15, had actually about 3% income increase when they reached 30. So it pays off. It's not just, nice to have, it actually pays off.
Thank you. So we had another question in the audience. Alihan, if you may. Thank you.
Yes, hi. My name is Matteo Sostro. I'm a researcher for the European Commission working on skills. I'd like to ask the panelists if we are sure that we are looking at this from the right perspective, namely the focus is about youth and whether they are ready, they have the right skills for the workforce. Now, both in the discussion today, in the narrative that is presented here and elsewhere, but also in the policy instruments proposed for the European Year of Skills, there's a lot of emphasis on workers, and in particular young people, adapting themselves to the labor market. They need to have the right skills, they need to have the right attitudes, the right mindset, the right flexibility, the right soft skills, etc. It starts, it seems to me we're asking quite a lot of them, and we perhaps are not asking enough from employers. Now, I have yet to see a sector that offers good wages and working conditions and struggles to find people on a structural basis. Of course, there might be times of adjustment, as we are experiencing one now, but it's not like the workforce has disappeared. So if on the one hand, we have high youth unemployment, but the people working, young people today are the most educated in history. Is it because they don't know the career path available to them? Is it because they lack role models? Is it because they don't have the right soft skills? Or is it because employers have been offering less on-the-job training, shorter contract tenures, and wages that have kept below productivity growth? So, and yet, this debate has been going on for decades now, and we have apparently successfully convinced everyone that it's workers who should adapt, and while at the same time the investment of the private sector on training skills, those that are developed inside the workplace, has stagnated. So are we sure that reaching out to young people, doing all this adjustment on the frictional side of the labor market, improving matching, doing a bit of skills anticipation, changing the way jobs are called, etc., will solve the structural problems of unemployment and low productivity growth that Europe suffers? Or should we also ask employers to do a little more as well? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I don't know if Delphine is the employer representative.
Yeah. I think there are several questions in your question. First of all, if you had asked me that question 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have answered the same. But today, industry is not the only sector facing skill shortages. So maybe you consider we have bad working conditions, but then the entire economy has bad working conditions in Europe because all sectors are struggling from skill shortages. So then the entire economy is offering bad working conditions. Maybe. Maybe. Well, a lot of them have disappeared. Excuse me to say, but a lot of them have disappeared. It's true. I don't know where they are, to be very honest. I have regular meetings with 10 colleagues of mine from the sectors. We don't know where they are. I can tell you, we don't know where they are. It's true. Yeah, maybe you can laugh, but a lot of them have disappeared. My second comment is that, unfortunately, Europe doesn't live, we're not an island. We compete. We compete with the rest of the world. So you can consider that maybe we offer bad working condition, which you seem to say. I mean, I can read between the line your message. But I mean, we are we live in an international world. We have competitors, and you know what it is. So at some point, I don't think that if you look at Europe compared to our competitors, our working conditions are that bad. I'm sorry to say. So I think you have to be looking at facts. I can talk for my sector. Look at the wages in the MET industries. Take it. Look at the collective agreements, and you will see that the working conditions in the MET industry, it's not as bad as what you seem to say. So I think that before saying things like that, you have to look at the situation. Now, I'm not saying that all the efforts have to be put on the workers. I don't think this is what we are saying. What I'm saying, and I think that the employers offer training. We offer on-the-job training. I think all the workers in the companies are trained every day in the companies. I think that, I wouldn't know one of our members who doesn't train very regularly their workers, who don't offer training, at least just by on-the-job training. It depends what you call training on the job also. So, that maybe we can have a discussion on that. Now, what we are saying is that to enter the labor market and to enter the company, this requires a number of qualifications. And now, again, it also depends what type of sector you want to reach. In the MET industry...
Delphine, may I ask you to pop so that, because I think everybody wants to respond.
That in the MET sector, you require a number of qualifications because most of the jobs are technically requires some technical qualification. So, you need to have a number of degree or a number of qualification. So this is the only thing that we require from the people. We're not asking more today than we were asking yesterday.
So I will take over now because I think everybody wants to have something to say, including Victor also, if I understood correctly. So I will start with Eliza, but then David and Victor.
I think one thing employers could do is open up more apprenticeships positions. That's really not happening. If you look at, we recently did a study in Scotland, it's only 16% of employers that have apprenticeship. In Switzerland, it's 24%. In Germany, 21%. Not enough of those. So, and sometimes the employers just think they're too small. Oh, we're a small SME, we can't take an apprenticeship, but actually that's the backbone of the economy. So if we skip those, so I think that's really something that employers could be doing in the direction of what you're asking for.
I just wanted to give a short story of one of our typical learners in Europe. Again, we're a global organization, so somebody vulnerable in Europe is not in the same, let's say, category as somebody vulnerable in Pakistan or India for obvious reasons. So let's give a concrete example. Irene from Spain, master's student in Spain, like many other students in Italy, Spain, Greece, Romania, who are unemployed below the age of 30. In her situation, the other reason for unemployment is actually there's three reasons. First of all, and this is the main answer to your question, I think, from my perspective, is there's a bridge between education to employment. That was the purpose of the panel today. Education providers in Europe and globally don't provide the relevant skills for industry, especially for industries that are growing so fast, tech industry, the green economy, that they're just not equipped to adapt to these changes. So that's one reason why Irene didn't find a job. Second reason is simply because she's in her situation living, she's a vulnerable person. She's living with her family in a city where there's no jobs. For her, she doesn't afford to move to a job with more, to a city with more jobs, so she's really confined to her little city in Spain. And finally, and this is maybe a reason a bit outside of the vulnerable category, we young people now living in the global economy, we do see opportunities around the world, so there's also managing of expectations. Going back to your point of somebody going into maybe a factory, what sort of expectations do they have? And managing these expectations, I think it's quite important for also the workforce to step up to the standards that employers nowadays have. But again, main issue is lack of relevant skills from the education providers, I think, the formal ones.
I think you also want to add something, right?
Yeah, I have a lot of things, but I will try to be punctual. So of course, this panel is focused on education and youth. This is why we mainly focused on that. This doesn't mean that we ignore seniors. And I have to tell you that I have been the initiator of different initiatives for seniors. And when asking the Commission to support us on that, they always tell us, let's focus on other target groups. So of course, at the Commission level, more work needs to be done on that as well. There are different problems and a wide range of solutions. There isn't only one. And this is very important. So, for instance, when it comes to mismatch, I give you my personal example. I studied political science. 400 students that finish the year, only 10% of them are working in the field of political science administration. So that means that the rest went in different fields. So there was mismatch. And this is something that we can correct structurally to make sure we are delivering on that. A third element that I think it's important is not forget that we are not speaking about numbers, but we speak about human beings. So the human touch when it comes to policies related to skills is essential, and we tend to ignore it. At European level, we said we are going to train and make sure 90% of working people around Europe have to have digital skills. 90%. We put a number. But we have to make sure people really understand what it is about and really convince them to be part of that for themselves as well. And everyone, all stakeholders, including the private sector, has to do its part. And when it comes to the private sector, there is a problem that I underlined in my initial intervention. Only 40% of the current European workforce has access to lifelong learning during their professional activity, meaning that 60% doesn't have. And where is the problem? On one side, there are some companies that do not do their part, but we also have many companies that do their part, and we have to support them in this regard. But we have to look, like you said very well, at what is happening at European level. 90% of European companies are SMEs, and some of them, with a couple of employees, do not have the capacity to develop integrated and successful training programs on the job. And we have to help them by doing projects for training in SMEs, supporting them also financially, but also supporting them with the adequate technical support. So this is also important. But also, if we look at everything that we are doing, we have to make sure that we support what is happening at European level. So just yesterday, for instance, I met a Danish-Romanian entrepreneur in the tech sector. And he's building a robot for education. Because he produces a robot in Europe, and he trains people on the ground. He has roughly 30 employees, from what he told me. His robot cost 550 euros. His competitor comes from China, where they do not pay the same salary, where there is not lifelong learning, and the robot cost 100 euros. And he was telling me that when he's participating to different types of competitions, call for tenders, with European money, even from the recovery fund, the Chinese company wins all the competitions. So his 550 euro robot is not competitive enough. So he was thinking about leaving the European market to go produce a robot elsewhere where we do not comply with our social rules and social standards. So of course, if we really have to have, or we want to have an holistic approach, let's think about all those dimensions. Because like I said, and everyone said here, and you said very well, there isn't a simple solution. So this is why we need to really discuss and see how we can approach things into details. Details do count in order to face the current challenges.
So about the quality of job, I want to add something. We always focus around like the pay, the nature of the job, but also values are now part of the quality of job. And for many young people, having values that they can relate to is an important aspect to actually accept a job offer. So I also heard that now like 2 out of 5 young adults are refusing job offers because the values are not in alignment. This wasn't the case 10 years ago. Now we are having new challenges of ourselves also. We have a question in Slido asking why not targeting like quality and relevance of lifelong learning instead of the numbers, but I think Victor already addressed that question. There is another question in Slido which I think is very relevant for young people and especially for the European Union. It is, so let me see. Okay, should young people take unpaid internships for the upskilling it can provide? I think that's a big problem they are experiencing, and they were hoping to solve this in European Year of Youth. Now maybe in European Year of Skill we can do that. So I'm going to give the floor again to Victor because I think he has been working on this already.
Yeah, very clearly, they shouldn't take unpaid internship because we should not have unpaid internships. And this is a big debate in the parliament, because a couple of us support this idea of banning unpaid internships, and other political groups did not support this idea. And this is a big political discussion as well. Of course, we have to define what we mean by internship, and this is clearly, of course, there is, of course, a difference, maybe to a certain extent, between school education and the initial training part and internships as such, and this has to be reflected upon very clearly. But when you refer to an internship that demands professional activities from a person, that means that person does a job, that person gives an added value to an employer, and the employer has to pay for that respective added value. In the same time, it is clear that when a person gets access to skilling on the job, that person will become more productive, more efficient from the company, is useful for the company. So that is clear, that clearly means that the person also needs to be paid during that respective period. And in European legislation across member states, we have that very clearly defined. There is on-job training, and that is taking out of the hours that the person spends on the job, and the person needs to be paid. And for that, this is why I believe we have to think at things more strategic when it comes to the financing part. So we do call for tenders for European funds, and there is competition, this is good, but why not develop these structural ways of financing these types of on-the-job training that is actually happening? Instead of inventing new suppliers, inventing new programs, why not finance, especially for SMEs, these on-the-job activities? So of course, SMEs can afford training people, and people working for SMEs would see a future for themselves in working for such small companies that are the backbone of European economy.
Okay, thank you. Of course.
In addition to what Victor said, that if a company pays for it, then it really has an impact on the content of what the internship will have. The other part is also in terms of a societal impact, is who takes an unpaid internship? Someone who can afford it. So if you also have to think about the disadvantaged groups who will need to have internships that are paid for, otherwise they won't access them. So there's also an issue there about equality and equity that we have to take into account when we think about internships.
Thank you, that's very true. We have 2 minutes. I will quickly address a question in Slido very quickly, and then we close with the last final question from the audience. In Slido, they are asking whether there is initiatives directly targeting at migrants groups. Yes, there is. So in Bruegel, if you check the past events link on our website, you will see a webinar on serving underserved communities, and there you will see some European and US examples. And then we have the last question in the audience. Alihan, do you mind? Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Coralie. I work for Johnson & Johnson. And as a global healthcare company, one thing that we've seen that was a trend before COVID, but that seems to have been further exacerbated, is a shortage specifically of healthcare workers around the world. And when you've talked about the skills of the future and the jobs of the future today, you've talked about digital skills, green skills, but healthcare skills are also a key part of the conversation, and sometimes that's something that we need in the future. So just a sort of general question about, from your point of view, how do we continue to make those, or how do we start or continue to make those jobs attractive, and how do we continue to encourage young people to go towards healthcare?
I think both Eliza and also David has something to say, so
David?
please.
No, please.
Thank you for your question. And we do work already with healthcare providers. And the second category I mentioned after tech for us as a priority is healthcare. The only reason I see it might be a challenge going forward for us to basically keep healthcare number 2 as a priority and not have green economy or green jobs is because we are working with vulnerable people that we prepare for a completely new career in 3 months. You cannot teach somebody to be a doctor in 3 months. The people we prepare under our healthcare bracket are becoming mostly nurses, both men and female, which is very needed. But comparing that with the IT job or a green economy job, it doesn't have the same appeal to most of our candidates. So that's in a nutshell why I think it's very important, but at least from our side, from this kind of approach of really credential-based short programs, it's very hard for us to help prepare doctors, of course, in that amount of time. So
2 things from our side. One is on the 26th of September, we will launch the Skills Outlook 2023, which is looking at recovery post-COVID, and we're looking at digital, green, and health skills. So stay tuned for that. We're having also a few working papers coming up very soon. The other part is we're developing a new program around, you all are familiar with PISA, but PISA for vet. And one of the sectors that we have identified there is the health sector. So we will be focusing on that sector to try to assess those vet programs, particularly focusing on healthcare, because we see it particularly as a leverage. So very happy to have a chat after to give you more information on that. Thanks.
This is great because health and education are the 2 important sectors that we cannot really let having big shortages there. Please join me thanking the audience, and also thank you for your questions. And we will have a 15-minute coffee break, then we come back for adult workers this time. Thank you.